All right, guys, welcome back to Net Worth. I am your host, Justin Pugh. Today, we are going to take you behind the scenes with the most behind the scenes guy in the NFL, Adam Schefter. Adam, welcome to the show, brother.
Justin, great to be with you. Congratulations on your career. What does net worth mean? What does the name of that podcast mean exactly?
So, we're going to Net Worth. We're diving into the business of sports. I'm a finance major myself at Syracuse and,
Right.
wanted to dive into what goes on behind the dollars and cents. I sit on the finance committee with our union. The end
Okay.
goal, the North Star for me is if 78% of NFL guys go broke. I don't even know what that statistic actually means. If when I'm done with this, we can have that be 70% or 50%, that is the goal. So it's
Right.
been a fun ride. This is our 30th episode, and it's something that I look forward to continuing to do.
Well, congratulations. Happy to be with you today.
Well, you get guys like you who went to Michigan and Northwestern, grew up in New York, dollars and cents, the business of sports. I mean, no one knows it better than you. So, first thing I want to ask you is being from New York, what team are you a fan of?
Well, I grew up initially as a Jets fan, but you honestly lose any allegiance to any NFL team as you immerse yourself in the sport. And I moved out to Colorado in 1990. I covered the Denver Broncos for almost 16 years there. And you become, you form relationships with people that you wind up hoping that they do well. And so for a while there, when I was covering the Broncos, it was fun to see them succeed because the better they did, the larger platform it provided for me. And when they won 2 Super Bowls, I was fortunate to be able to write a couple of books because they did. If they hadn't won Super Bowls, I wouldn't have written those books. And when you have been doing this, I've been doing it now for 35 years. You really don't root for any teams. I root for my fantasy football team, I can tell you that. And I root for the people that I have relationships with that I like in the sport. That's who you wind up rooting for. You don't root for teams. You root for individuals and you root for your fantasy teams.
Who won you the have you won a fantasy team just yet? Have you won a league yet?
I've had better luck in fantasy basketball than I've had in fantasy football. 16-team ESPN league, very, very difficult with 16 teams in a league. And last year I was able to make it to the finals, but did not prevail. So it was unfortunate.
Look, there's a little bit of luck that gets into it.
Oh, yeah.
I played in my family's league. I actually won this year for the first time, but I always found myself drafting my teammates and cheering for my guys. I'm an offensive lineman, so we don't ever have to worry about the blowback of social media. But I remember sometimes I would go into the locker room and be like, all right, Daniel Jones, all right, Saquon Barkley, I need you guys. We got to have a big week this week. I'm playing my cousin.
But, here's what's interesting, and you tell me if I'm accurate. A lot of times, like you're even on the team and you're seeing things, and sometimes you won't even realize that a guy is going to pop off and have a big game or that he's going to have a big season. Sometimes you see it coming, but it's not always the case, right? Like I remember there was a quarterback in Denver, and this was a little bit pre-fancy football, but I remember him pulling me aside during training camp. He's like, this team's got a problem. I'm like, what's the problem? He's like, we don't have a stallion in the backfield. I'm like, you don't have a stallion in the backfield? No, nobody that's going to be able to tote the rock for us. This was in mid-August. And that year, Terrell Davis won Rookie of the Year and, eventually helped them get to the Super Bowl and won an NFL MVP. So it was right in front of their nose, and sometimes you don't even see it. So that happens.
I've even seen the opposite. I see a guy in training camp. You think he's going to be all world. He's crushing it in
Right.
practice. And
Oh,
all of a
yeah.
sudden he goes out there. Then you have injuries. There's just so many different things that go into it. And fantasy is part of one of the most interesting things about where the NFL is going, how engaged fans are to a random Thursday night football game. And you've seen over your 35-year career,
Mm-hmm.
the ups and the downs and how the game has grown. But I guess the first question I really want to ask you is, how does one go about becoming an NFL insider? I know you're a reporter. You got
Yeah.
out to Denver. You're
Yep.
working out there. How do you go from just being a reporter for a team to being the most trusted insider in the NFL?
Well, thank you. I would just tell you that it's just a natural evolution. Um, I took a job in 1990 covering the Denver Broncos in the NFL. I did not intend to go to Denver. I did not intend to cover football. I would have liked to, at that point in my life, cover baseball or become a newspaper sports columnist, neither of which happened. I was rejected too many times to have that happen. I was literally forced to stick covering the Denver Broncos in the NFL. And if I had had my choice, I would have absolutely left and covered the Colorado Rockies when Colorado got a baseball team. And that shows you, I think, sometimes that, you know, you may have an idea of what you think is best for you, but you have no idea. And sometimes it's better off that things don't happen. And my life has been a story of that. And when I was forced to stick on the Broncos beat, I watched that team become really good and them hire Mike Shanahan and then win 2 Super Bowls. Like I mentioned, opportunities sprung up that I might not have ordinarily had the chance to have gotten on a team that didn't win. And then after spending over 15 years there, and wanting to do more, frankly, and wanting to grow my career, wanting to become perhaps a sports newspaper columnist at that point in time, they weren't giving me that job. And so the NFL Network came calling, and they hired me early in the onset of that launch, and I became a football insider for them, really not knowing what I was going to be doing. And I remember balking at that because I didn't want to have my Saturday nights interrupted with a breaking story. And I think back to that, like it gave me pause. And the world that we live in now is just so relentless all the time that it doesn't matter whether it's 7 in the morning, 7 at night, 11 in the morning, 11 at night. Something could happen at any point where, you know, your job is to report on that. And it's a relentless type of job. I'm probably not qualified to do much of anything else in this world. So I'm fortunate and blessed, but it's just something, Justin, that grew over time. 35 years doing this, covering the NFL since 1990, seeing how a locker room works back then in Denver for 15, 16 years, being fortunate to get to know some people around the league, seeing some people in Denver branch out to other places, watching them grow and having their careers thrive and prosper, which was kind of cool to see. People that, you know, were little boys, like Mike McDaniel was a ball boy when I was covering the Denver Broncos, and Kyle Shanahan was carrying his father's headset. And, you know, you wouldn't know that these people would go on to achieve the success that they have. And it's very nice to see for them. So it's just being in the industry for 35 years and having it evolve and grow over time. That's really all it is.
And the one thing that you mentioned there that sticks out to me is the networking component. You never know if that ball boy is going to become one of the best
Right.
coaches in the NFL, and you don't know how that works. From that standpoint, when did and I read some articles and saw how much you're on the phones, you're talking to people, and it's part of the reason probably why you're on this podcast. You're the first to respond. I've never had anyone respond that quickly, which is one of the most impressive things that I've ever seen. But I think that's what makes you great is because people know they're going to get a response. They know they can rely on you. And that's why there's this two-way communication transfer that you have the information and then you're able to get it. I think that is something that I want to take. And from studying you and reading up about you, I think that is something that will do well for business. So I do think you don't give yourself enough credit. If you did any line of work with the mentality that you have, I think you would be successful.
Well,
The key,
it's funny to say that because my friends joke with me that they know that if they send me a text, they say that I'm the only person that within 30 seconds they're going to have a response. I mean, it's just how I operate. And I don't know.
is there one phone you answer more than the other? Because I read that you have two different phones, two different cell phone providers. How did that come about? Did something die on you? Did a phone go out or a service?
Well, it's essentially a case where they are two providers. Sometimes you're in a place where you get better coverage on one phone or another. Another time, you know, you could be talking on this phone as you're typing notes on this phone. So that serves a purpose. One time a battery may be running low on a phone, so you have the other phone as a backup. Like there's a lot of reasons to have two phones. One is a primary number, and I've had that number since my days back in Colorado. Another one was added, you know, after I got to ESPN. I know the number, but I don't even have voicemail set up on the phone. It's not my primary phone. It's just a secondary phone. And so
It's
that,
just the backup.
yeah.
Now, have we eclipsed the 17 hours and 23-minute record of phone time on either of those yet? I saw that recently that you had set that record of screen time.
Well, you know what happened there? We were in Bristol doing a free agent special on ESPN, and one of the people who works for the social media team at ESPN, and there are so many great people here doing great things behind the scenes, that they say, "Hey, can we see the hours on your?" I've never even checked. I don't look. So
Yeah.
I showed her it was 17 hours and 23 minutes or whatever it was. And she said, "Is that a record?" I'm like, "Well, I guess it is because I've never checked before. So it's the first time. So if it's the first time, yeah, that would be the record for phone use." I don't know. Maybe I've had 19 hours. Maybe I've had 50. I have no idea. I never check it. It was the first time it was ever checked. And that's what turned up. And so that's what she went with in the post.
It blew up on the internet, and you had those viral moments. So I guess similar to NFL players, you've had this rise throughout the sports. I mean, it's lasted over 35 years, so longer than the average career. Even Tom Brady couldn't make it that long. How have you dealt with that fame and being in the same boat of all of a sudden you're under the public scrutiny when you put things out there? Your word
Yeah.
is law, and that
Yeah.
responsibility comes with a lot. I know me coming into the NFL, social media was just starting out, and I want to kind of jump into social media down the road. But how have you dealt with that fame, that perception, being out in public? You live in New York, so maybe it helps a little bit. You're in New York because there's a few other personalities there. But how has that changed your life?
Well, I just think the world that we all live and operate in today is so different than what it was. So everybody on social media is subjected to scrutiny, right? You could post anything, and all of a sudden people are going to be commenting on one of your posts, correct? Like, "Justin, you're the best. Justin, you're the worst. Justin, we love you. Justin, we hate you." And it's no different. And what you learn to do, I guess, over time is, as best you can, to tune out a lot of that noise and to just continue to focus in on your job. And, you know, I find the question that you ask a little bit amusing and entertaining, because all I've ever tried to be was a reporter, a newspaper reporter. And, it's led me where it has. And I'm fortunate that there's a platform that comes with it. And I guess there is recognition, but there's recognition, I think, with a lot of things that a lot of people do. I don't think that I'm unique in that regard. I've been fortunate enough that I've been doing it for a while. And so I've been doing it at ESPN, which is the largest sports media company there is. And so there are people that notice. And so I guess in this day and age, you just have to be incredibly mindful of anything that you are saying, doing, tweeting, posting, whatever it may be. And, when I was growing up, that was not the case. But, I have a daughter in ninth grade, and my wife and I talk to her all the time. You got to be smart about what you ever put out there, and, don't do something you're going to regret, and all the things that every parent says to any teenage child. Nothing unique there. But it's just a different world that we're all living and operating in. And I think we're all trying to get used to it and adjust to it and figure it out all the time, because everybody is under scrutiny, especially people who have larger social media platforms, I guess would be the way to say it.
And everyone deals with pressure. I mean, I feel the pressure when I step out there and I'm playing in a game and I'm going against Aaron Donald, and it's like, you can't let up a sack, not on prime time. And I went there against the
Right.
Bills this year. I was on my couch the week before, and I go out and have 2 false starts, give up 2 sacks to Von Miller. And all of a sudden I know what social media is saying. I know that pressure. And for
So
you,
you feel that. In other words, if you give up a sack, you have that question in your mind, like, "Oh, I'm getting ripped right now on social media.
well,
Somebody's ripping my ass."
I know my dumbass just said straight off the couch on Sunday Night Football. So
Yeah,
now all of a sudden there's like, oh, this guy should go back to the couch. He shouldn't be there. But I know that
yeah.
comes with territory, and that's built up over time. For you, it's like, if you don't break a story, that's like you letting up a sack. Is like, if someone beats you to a story, do you ever feel that kind of pressure? I mean, I can imagine if the biggest free agency signing of the season, or a trade like Stephon Diggs yesterday, do you feel like if you're not the first one to break it? I know you guys have a point system, which I'd love to talk
No,
about, but
we had a point. We don't do that anymore, thankfully.
no.
It's because
Okay, good.
it was added self-induced pressure that there's really no need for. Like, 2
Yeah.
weeks into free agency, you're fighting to get a free agent signing on, somebody that isn't going to generate any headlines on ESPN and isn't going to lead NFL Live. So what are we doing?
Yeah.
So we've definitely gotten rid of that system. My boss did. He invented a point system for free agents, and I'm glad he got rid of that. I don't need any incentive to do my job or pursue a certain story. I'd like to think, after doing this as long as I have, I know what matters and what doesn't. And yes, the business, there's so many people doing this now. There's so many people vying for information that because of that, the job is, I think, as challenging as it's ever been, because of the speed at which things move and because of the number of people who recognize the value in information. So yeah, it's hard. And so because it's hard, there's pressure that comes along with that. Um, and I don't mean to be cliched or anything, but if there's a professional pride in you and you're driven and you're determined, then you just want to do the best job you can all the time, whatever that is. And so nobody wants to get beat on a story ever. That's the reality of the situation. It happens. I'm human. Just like you get beat for a sack, I get beat on a story. That happens. But you go forward and you move on to the next story because there's always another story after one you didn't get.
Oh, 100%. Was there ever a story that was like, hey, this is the one that put me on the map? Was there a story where you look back and you're like, this is the one that kind of changed the trajectory of my career and kind of made me that
Yeah,
insider?
I don't know about that. I think that it's just an accumulation of work over time. Like free agency started, I believe, in 1993 or 1994. And back when I was at the Denver newspaper back in those days, like I loved free agency. I just thought it was an unbelievable thing that teams could go sign players and players could jump to new teams and get paid money. And, you know, there's nobody that's signing a free agent that you're saying, oh, that's bad. It's all about hope and excitement. And we got Justin Pugh, or we got this guy, or we got that guy. And so I always leaned into that, always back then. And there weren't many people doing that back then. And I did it for a long period of time. It was always something that I found to be fascinating. And, I'd like to think, just like Mel Kiper has been doing the draft forever, I've been doing free agency since it started. And so there's a certain familiarity with it. There's a certain longevity with it. I've covered basically every year of free agency since its inception. And that's, that's something that people have cared about. And I'm honored to have been able to participate in, I guess, in the form I have.
And in free agency, you get to talk to all the sides. I've even seen that players reach out to you, and that's how I was able to reach out through social media and the beauty of social media. Players reach out, and you kind of give them a idea of what the market's looking like. Have there's ever been agents? I'm sure people have tried to poach you away from ESPN at all times. I saw an Alshon Jeffrey article that came out where he was hitting you up to see who was
that got overstated, and he got offended. I don't. There are times that people ask, and you're weighing in with your opinion of what you've gathered in conversations. And if it helps, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But, again, I think what I've learned is the more information you have, the more people would like to talk to you. And the more people you want to talk to you, then the more information you get. And the more information you get, the more people want to talk to you. And it just keeps going back and forth, round and round. And that's sort of the way the job works. So, if there are coaches or front office executives reaching out to figure out what the market is, well, they're smarter for it. You're smarter for it. You're more informed. They're more informed. And that's sort of the way that it works with free agency, the draft, in season, trades, whatever it may be. I mean, that kind of stuff is going on all the time.
And I think social media has really changed the landscape of all of it. I mean, you have 11 million followers. You were one of the first ones, 2014. You were you named the most influential tweeter. You started doing podcasting in 2017. You really changed the game. Have you gone to Elon Musk and asked him, like, hey, I might need a percentage of this right now?
Well, what's funny, Justin, is that when I left the NFL Network in 2009 and ESPN hired me in the spring of 2009, I did not have a Twitter, X, Facebook, or Instagram account. Literally got hired at ESPN in 2009 without any social media platforms, training, understanding of how it worked. I remember one of my buddies in NFL Network. Remember there was a story in Time magazine about Twitter, this new outlet, and how people were taking to it and signing up for it. And I was like, wow, okay, well, let me let me get on there and see what that's about. And so it's comical to me. ESPN hired me in the spring of 2009. And the idea initially was that I was going to be doing, if you could believe this, the new 9 a.m. Sports Center. That was what they hired me to do, the new 9 a.m. Sports Center. So what is now like Get Up and First Take, they were launching a sports center to stop replaying the overnight sports centers because they would play the overnight sports centers all through the morning. And so they were starting a brand new sports center, 9 a.m. And they wanted me to do NFL news and information on that 9 a.m. sports center. So I went to ESPN to help launch the 9 a.m. sports center and to start a new Twitter/X account and to eventually sign on to Instagram or Facebook or Threads or whatever it may be. And again, all this is stuff that evolved over time to where, here we are today.
But it's crazy. You actually sort of started something similar to Twitter without even knowing it. Didn't you used to have a newsletter where you would send out to coaches, GMs, things of the like? Is that right?
No. I would text people, stuff that would happen before Twitter, like, okay, hey, Stephon Diggs got traded, because it wasn't flying around information. So you text people that information. And I found that if you texted them information, well, then they text you back. And then you'd strike up a relationship. And, you'd say Stephon Diggs got traded. And like, hey, I heard that this is happening too. Okay. Yeah. And so you can't do that anymore because iPhone, at least I haven't found it. I think people do it somehow. Doesn't allow you to group text people in a file. Like I couldn't call up, front office executives and text people the way I did with a BlackBerry back in the day. So I haven't done anything like that in over 15 years.
But it was a little bit before any of this technology was around. There was the only way to get it was through reading the newspaper, logging in online. But you were able to fire off like breaking news to all these people, which added value to what you brought. You keep going back to how you respond, how you interact with people. That's the one key that I keep taking away. It's like you're never behind. You're always on the cutting edge. You're not scared to jump into whatever's next. Where do you see this new media landscape going? What have you seen throughout the course of your career? Like whoever would have thought Twitter would be where it is. Yeah. Now we have this information coming out in seconds. How has that landscape changed media? And do you think there's this new wave? Look at Pat McAfee. You look at these guys now that are getting bigger and bigger.
Well, it's hard to see where it's going because, again, there's a blurring of information. And, it all moves so quickly now. And I'm used to back in the day, Justin, where, I was a newspaper writer and you'd file your story to the news desk. The story would come out in the newspaper at 6 a.m. It hit your driveway the next morning and you read about it and you'd be like, oh, again, Stephon Diggs traded to the Houston, and that would live in that newspaper for 24 hours until the next day newspaper arrived. Yeah. And then the news cycle would start over. And now you could post something and 10 seconds later post something else and something else could happen. And the news cycle, isn't 24 hours, it's 24 seconds. So everything is just sped up. And now information is literally at all of our fingertips at any moment. And again, everybody wants to report on something, say something. I said that before it was going to happen. Inevitably, somebody's going to say, I said the Bears were going to take Caleb Williams in January. Oh, great. So there's all kinds of people planting their flags and saying, I said this first. Those flags don't get noticed when things don't happen.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's more of like a who's right, who's doing the fact checking, who's doing those things. Because being first isn't as valuable as being right and being first. So I think there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, well, no one notices again when other people are wrong, when they were out front on something that didn't happen. But people are very quick to pound their chest and scream, "I had it first." So that's the world we're living in. It's how it operates.
Yeah,
and. So it's a constantly changing world, and to say where it's going, I'd love to know. I don't know, but it just seems like it's changing all the time.
So being able to be flexible. And I think the other thing is being first in mind. So when someone has a news or has something they want to share with you, having that first text fire off going to you. So to stay first in mind, I'm sure you got to buy a lot of beers for a lot of guys at the combine and coaches, or maybe it's the converse now. People are probably sending you things sometimes to try to make sure they stay on your good side. What's the craziest gift you've ever given or received for, within the NFL circles?
Oh, I don't think I've gotten too many gifts from people. I'm not allowed to take gifts from people.
Okay.
But again, at Christmas time, I like to send out something just as a little thank you for people for um, just being, a part of my life and answering my calls and answering my texts. I ask a lot of people reaching out, and I like to think that I give them something too. But it's just nice, just like a basic human courtesy to just acknowledge, hey, appreciate what you do, appreciate you giving me time, appreciate you responding to me. Thank you. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy New Year. That's all.
Who's some of your favorite guys that you've worked with? You mentioned Shanahan, the Broncos. That's where you got your start. Who
Yeah,
are
well,
some other coaches you like?
yeah, well, I mean, that's, Denver's in my soul because I spent formative professional years out there. So, covering those Super Bowl teams, that's always a neat thing. And I think about the people that were in that locker room, some of the great people. These guys were so generous with me. I was this young cub reporter who really didn't know much of anything. They didn't have any reason to talk to me, and people were nice to me back in the day. And it allowed me the chance to grow. And so I'm always appreciative of those people and those teams. They always hold a soft spot in my heart. And it's always great when I see somebody elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, whether it's Steve Atwater or Gary Zimmerman or Shannon Sharp or John Elway or Terrell Davis, the many people that I covered back in the day that I was fortunate. And there were other great people, right? Like Mark Schlereth was a tremendous guy to interact with. And I've done some radio with him in Denver post my Denver newspaper career. And, Bill Romanowski was always a entertaining character who I spent a lot of time with and enjoyed him and his wife, Julie, as well. And, I remember Thanksgiving last year hearing about the passing of a guy by the name of Harold Hasselback, who was a defensive lineman in Denver, and back in the day on games I always remember Harold standing at his locker, no matter what happened, and answering the questions in a professional way, and always being an upstanding professional guy like that. That's something I always remember. So these people that I dealt with for 15, 16 years always hold a special spot in my heart.
We always talk about name, image, and likeness is coming out, and NFL players have been using it. How have you been able to use your name, image, and likeness for investments maybe outside of work? And that's something I always find very interesting. How have you been able to leverage your own brand, because you've built such a successful brand, to do some things off the field? Is there anything you like to do other than football?
Well, I love watching golf. I love watching and playing fantasy basketball, as I mentioned. These are little escapes, little vices, little ways that allow me to leave the relentless NFL world that we live and operate in. And so that to me is always great and appreciated. And I was fortunate to be able to do a few games reporting for ESPN sidelines and, interacting and crossing paths with people in the NBA. That was always, to me, a lot of fun. And I've noticed, and you'll know this as well, that if there are people in entertainment or another sport, they love being a part of the football world, just like you love stepping into their worlds. And so when the worlds kind of intersect, people are very curious and interested in your world, and you're curious and interested in their world. So when I would step into the NBA world, it was kind of cool to cross paths with some of those people. And they would ask me football questions. Oh, what's going on? What are my Cowboys doing? What's going on in Washington? They wanted to know. And so that was a lot of fun. I don't think about it as NIL. Again, any opportunities that come my way, of course, as a person, you're always curious to see if anything comes your way. And sometimes there are some things that are interesting that means something to you. I've just recently been a part of a campaign. My wife is a type 1 diabetic, to raise awareness for diabetes testing for a company called Sanofi. And, that's been a meaningful project that's still been going on. They engage me and Usher and Robin Arzone from Peloton, because Robin's type 1 and Usher's child is type 1. And so it gives us a chance to speak out and raise awareness about diabetes and have people get tested. That's kind of cool. So things like that have a little bit of meaning. You'll learn things that are meaningful and matter, whereas there are other things that don't. And so again, that evolves over time. Like all of us, we're smarter for decisions we do and don't make. And again, I feel fortunate and blessed that to have had the opportunity to do some of these things.
How's the golf game? How's the golf handicap right now? I just played yesterday with my buddies. It was terrible.
Yeah, I'm much better watching than playing. Like, much better watching than playing. But to play well, you gotta be out there, and you gotta play it regularly. And I don't have the time to do it. I don't have the patience to do it. You're on the course, calls are coming in, texts because something happens. Now your focus is gone, and if your focus isn't there, good luck playing. Like, good luck with that.
100%. I mean, during this show, if it's been 30 minutes, has anything broke during the show? I mean, we're taped and we're not live, so you can say I'm not going to spoil anything. Is anything good happening while we've been on the show?
I've missed a couple of phone calls, 1 or 2 texts. No, nothing in particular. Broncos just signed a center, the former Raven center, Sam Mustafa.
There we go. That's perfect. That's all I need. It's your favorite team, my favorite position. That is very fitting. This will come out in a few weeks. We'll know this already happened. Adam, I really appreciate the time. This was awesome. Your insight. I'm taking what you do and how you live your life and how you're constantly interacting and treating people the right way. I'm going to take that into the business world on my end, because I think that's something that can be very useful.
Well, Justin, you've done great. You don't need any help from me, and just keep doing what you do. And I wish you continued success. And it was a pleasure and honor to be on with you today.
Thanks, Adam. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Justin.